What if ancient China wasn't the beginning of a civilization, but the end of one? Not a cradle, but a survivor. Hidden within the folds of its myths, symbols, and scrolls lies a possibility few dare to entertain: that this ancient culture inherited its wisdom from something even older. The classic of Mountains and Seas speaks of dragon-born emperors and sacred beasts. Meditative arts describe the flow of invisible energy, qi, as if it were once measurable and real. And at the center of it all stands the dragon. Not a fairy tale, but a guardian, a memory, maybe even a living being. Could emperors have once communed with such creatures? Could dragons have pulled their chariots, guarded their courts, or even served as symbols of power in a world that once mastered energy, not just matter? The deeper we look, the less it seems like myth and more like a fragmented record of something lost to time. Long before the Qin dynasty built the Great Wall, or the Han emperors expanded the Silk Road, China's roots reached into a shadowed past, a time not of nation-states, but of cosmic rulers, living myths, and forgotten arts. It is here, in the misty beginnings of recorded history, that we find the most curious clues, buried in ancient books and the whispered legacies of sages. Among the earliest and most enigmatic of these texts is the Shanhai Jing, or Classic of Mountains and Seas. Believed to predate even the Zhou dynasty, this compilation reads less like a map and more like a mythic archive, filled with descriptions of strange beasts, celestial rivers, immortal kings, and most intriguingly, dragons that dwell in hidden lands and guard sacred thresholds. To modern scholars, these tales are symbolic, but what if they aren't? What if these entries are encoded memories of real places, real beings, and real events that today defy comprehension? The earliest sovereigns of China were not called kings. They were known as the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. These weren't just rulers, they were culture bringers, healers, inventors, and in some versions, demigods. Fuxi taught humanity to fish and write. Nua mended the sky after a cosmic catastrophe. Shennong introduced agriculture and herbal medicine. And presiding over this semi-divine pantheon was the Yellow Emperor, Huangdi, said to have ruled for over a century, wielding knowledge of medicine, energy, and the stars. According to the Book of Documents, Shujing, and later Taoist texts, Huangdi not only unified tribes through wisdom, but also communed with the heavens through meditation and ceremony. His court, it is said, researched the nature of the cosmos and internal energy, laying the foundation for traditional Chinese medicine and the practice of qi cultivation. In some versions of the legend, he even ascended to the heavens on the back of a dragon. This is no isolated image. Dragons, long serpentine majestic, appear again and again in ancient texts and imperial rituals. But unlike the monstrous dragons of the West, Chinese dragons were never evil. They were symbols of harmony, power, and divine right, beings that controlled weather, guarded sacred knowledge, and accompanied the worthy. Were they metaphors for natural forces? Or is it possible that ancient scribes were describing someone they once knew firsthand? The dragon was more than a mythic beast. It was a symbol so deeply woven into the soul of Chinese civilization that emperors claimed descent from it. The imperial throne was called the Dragon Throne. The emperor's robes bore 5-clawed dragons, a distinction forbidden to all others under penalty of death. But why such obsession with a creature said to be imaginary? Some believe the dragon was a composite, a fantastical hybrid based on real animals: the snake, the crocodile, the deer, the carp. But that fails to explain the dragon's behavioral patterns across ancient texts. These dragons weren't just beasts of legend. They acted with intelligence, guarded spiritual sites, and responded to ritual. In certain Taoist scrolls, dragons were said to appear only to those of high spiritual cultivation, as if they were not entirely of this world, but visitors between dimensions, tethered to consciousness more than biology. Tales from the Zhou and Han dynasties describe emperors calling upon dragons during droughts or celestial alignments. Some records speak of great serpents that descended from the mountains during sacred festivals. Even Confucian scholars, known for their pragmatism, did not dismiss the dragon. They merely interpreted it as the highest form of virtue and natural order. But what if there's another possibility? That dragons once existed in some physical or interdimensional form? Not fire-breathing monsters, but ancient beings, perhaps bioengineered or spiritually evolved, who were revered and protected by the earliest sages. Could it be that these dragons were kept in isolated mountain sanctuaries, accessible only to the inner circle of the imperial cult? Some fringe researchers suggest that dragons were not mere animals, but symbiotic entities, living conduits of energy that bonded with those who had mastered Qi and Tao. And perhaps they were more than guardians. Perhaps they were tools, not mechanical, but biological, used to traverse vast distances or even to manipulate the weather. Some theories propose that imperial chariots drawn by dragons were not fantasy, but misunderstood descriptions of lost technology, possibly involving levitation, energy manipulation, or even consciousness projection. In this framework, the bond between the emperor and the dragon was no metaphor. It was a literal alignment of power. Only those attuned to the Tao could command the dragon. Only those who cultivated the spirit to perfection could earn its loyalty. If dragons once walked the earth or watched it from the clouds, then the civilization that revered them may not have been entirely homegrown. What if ancient China, as we know it, was not the first light of human culture, but the last flicker of a much older fire? Across Chinese territory, archaeologists have uncovered ruins that defy the timeline of conventional history. The Sangxingdui site, discovered in Sichuan province, revealed enormous bronze masks with alien-like eyes, strange symbols, and ritualistic relics that don't match any known Han traditions. These artifacts point to a culture advanced in metallurgy and spiritual iconography, but disconnected from later dynastic China. Who were these people, and where did their knowledge come from? Some researchers propose that they, in early imperial China, inherited fragments of the pre-flood, pre-chronological world, a world devastated by natural or cosmic catastrophe. This echoes global traditions: the Sumerian flood, the fall of Atlantis, the submerged continent of Mu. Perhaps the Yellow River Basin became a safe haven, a cradle for survivors who still remembered pieces of that ancient science. This would explain why technologies like the compass, paper, seismographs, and early medicine appeared in China with almost inexplicable sophistication. The Yellow Emperor, again, becomes a pivotal figure, not merely a founder, but a restorer, a being who reintroduced, rather than invented, what once was known. The dragon, then, would be not just a Chinese symbol, but a memory of an older order, one that spanned continents and collapsed under forces now lost to time. The fact that so many civilizations, from Mesoamerica to Mesopotamia, share similar serpent deities may not be coincidence. It may be inheritance. And what better place to preserve such inheritance than within a civilization obsessed with memory, ritual, and continuity? Unlike many ancient cultures whose records were destroyed or rewritten, Chinese civilization built layer upon layer without complete erasure, which means its myths, if read correctly, might contain echoes of a much deeper truth. Beyond dragons, ruins, and emperors lies perhaps the most enduring legacy of ancient China: its mastery of the inner world. While the West charted maps and built machines, the Chinese sages turned inward, exploring the body as a vessel, the mind as a compass, and the spirit as a gateway to the cosmos. Central to this was Qi, the life force believed to flow through all things. In traditional Chinese medicine, Qi isn't a metaphor. It moves through meridians like rivers through land. It can be blocked, strengthened, refined. Techniques like acupuncture, herbal formulas, and breathing exercises were all designed not to treat symptoms, but to restore energetic harmony. But the science of Qi went far beyond medicine. Through systems of cultivation like Qigong, Tai Chi, and Taoist internal alchemy, practitioners sought to transform themselves, not just spiritually, but physically. Legends tell of sages who lived for hundreds of years, who could walk without leaving footprints, who disappeared into mountains and returned decades later unchanged. While modern minds may dismiss these as exaggerations, recent studies into breathwork, electromagnetic fields, and consciousness suggest that the body may be far more sensitive and capable than we've imagined. Cultivation wasn't just mysticism, it was discipline, a science of human potential that aimed not at domination of others, but mastery of the self. At the heart of this quest stood the Tao, the Way. Not a god, not a doctrine, but the natural order behind all things. To live by the Tao was to harmonize with nature, with the seasons, with one's breath and thought. The deeper one aligned, the more effortless life became. The sages taught that when one truly follows the Tao, miracles are unnecessary because everything flows. Some ancient texts even suggest that dragons were drawn to those who walked the Tao, not because of ritual or bloodline, but because of resonance. Like tuning forks in harmony, the dragon and the master would find each other in silence. In this light, dragons become less creatures and more reflections, embodiments of balance, will, and transformation. And cultivation becomes more than personal growth. It becomes memory, a practice that preserved what the world had forgotten. Today, skyscrapers rise above Beijing, neon light floods the streets of Shanghai, and satellites orbit high above the land once ruled by dragon emperors. On the surface, modern China seems to have left its ancient mysticism behind, but look closer, and you'll see the remnants everywhere. Qi is still spoken of, if quietly. In mountain monasteries and quiet courtyards, old masters still move slowly through morning air, practicing forms unchanged for centuries. Acupuncture clinics operate beside shopping malls. Taoist temples, tucked away behind glass towers, still burn incense to the unseen. And every year, during New Year festivals, the dragon still dances, not as myth, but as memory. The dragon, the emperor, the cultivator, they were never meant to be separated. They were parts of the same idea, that true power lies not in conquest, but in resonance. That energy is real and can be trained. That the forgotten past may still live within us, in breath, in silence, in intention. So was ancient China a great civilization before the Common Era? Without a doubt. But perhaps it was something more. Perhaps it was a keeper, a preserver of deeper truths, echoes from an age the earth no longer remembers. The myths of dragon chariots, immortal sages, and cosmic energy may sound impossible until we realize how much we've forgotten. The question is not whether dragons once flew, but whether we still remember how to see them.